much, everyone. When you look back at the collisions between freedom of speech and Islam over the last few years, almost all the episodes were centered on cartoons and images of the Prophet Muhammad. And almost all of those images were produced by non-Muslims. This has allowed some Muslims to make the observation that freedom of speech is simply a practical cover for anti-Muslim bigotry. Or as one cleric put it, freedom of speech means you can curse the Prophet and democracy will protect you. But let me tell you of an incident that happened last year, which blows that notion out of the water. Last March, a Muslim scientist called Dr. Usama Hassan, who is the Imam of the Masjid Tawheed in Leytonstone, delivered a lecture at the mosque in which he said that belief in Quranic cosmology and Darwinian evolution was perfectly compatible. The lecture was badly received, and even before he was allowed to finish, his audience broke out into loud and angry jeering. Following that evening, Dr. Hassan has continued to receive death threats, intimidating phone calls, and online defamation. The subject of his lecture wasn't Islamophobic in any way, but judging from the outcry, he might as well have stood up in front of his congregation and stuck up a Jesus and Mo cartoon. Sometimes it's easier to understand freedom of speech by considering what it is not, rather than what it is. Freedom of speech isn't merely the right to draw silly cartoons of Muhammad. Freedom of speech is the freedom to analyze any idea on its own terms. I'll tell you what freedom of speech isn't. Last week, the LSE Union passed a motion with the title, No to Islamophobia. Now, most of this policy was fairly anodyne, fairly solid stuff, but it did contain a clause which bans any criticism of the Quran and labels it a form of racism. This is a prohibition that is begging to be abused, and it is nothing less than implementing a blasphemy law on campus. And like the blasphemy law in Pakistan, it deals exclusively with offenses to Islam only. The LSE Union would never draw up a law to protect Christian students from offenses to their faith. So why the double standards? Meanwhile, there is no end to the conveyor belt of Muslim extremists allowed into universities to preach hatred and intolerance. LSE's policy stays silent when a hate preacher cites the Quran to express his hatred of homosexuals and apostates, but takes swift action to censor anyone if an aspect of the Quran is directly criticized. We know what university is about. University is about students being allowed to be exposed to the free flow of discussion and dissenting opinions. Without these, they have no way of knowing new truths or being exposed to new ideas. We are fortunate to be living in a society where, thankfully still, no one has the right to be free from offense. And in the general scheme of things, that is a good thing. We should never capitulate to the intimidation and force wielded by those who cannot tolerate the open debate of ideas. My plea to you today is simple. Protect ideas and protect the idea makers. Failure to do so would be a grave offense to us all. Thank you for your support.